This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Summertime is almost coming to an end. So you know what that means. NBA season, NBA Media Day, guys coming back or reporting back to camp. All of that is just literally around the corner. But me personally, I like summer exactly where it is. You know what I'm saying? Because leave it to the NBA to continue, staring at the forefront of Dramaville. You almost kind of want, like, before we start getting into changing the seasons, like all of this stuff play itself out. You know what I'm saying? Before you start talking about a new premier season popping up right around the corner, of the NBA. But it's great to see that, as always, man, we continue to have an opportunity and a platform for us to be able to talk about what's going down with the NBA, and ready to discuss the 78th season schedule of the NBA. And I guess you and I can safely say that we have been there for a good 30 of them, 30 plus of them.
At least paying attention, I guess, to some degree.
Yeah. Let me roll out the red carpet to my man, www.shawsports.net. Big Kahuna PC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, my man? I mean, our pairing almost seems to be running, neck and neck to the NBA's, you know what I'm saying? Seasons releases.
We love it, man. As you alluded to, summer winding down here a little bit. And we're a month or so away. The World Championships are also a week or so away as we record. So a lot of basketball news and conversation to kind of get into, the NBA schedule being one of the key points here. They do a really good job of parsing out things over the course of summer. So people like us can have things to talk about kind of throughout. But there was some other news that broke over the last week or so that we didn't touch on that we definitely will. And I think, again, before we even get too far down the line, shout outs to the Hall of Fame inductees, as we did not record that week, but Pau Gasol, Becky Hammond, obviously Greg Popovich, Dwayne Wade, Dirk Nowitzki, and Tony Parker, all those folks, and anybody I neglected to mention, shout out to them. Congratulations on being inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame.
Totally. And I got to tell you, their speech is probably the collective of all of those inductees. Their speeches, I think, was probably the best that I think I've heard. I don't want to use the word ever, but I just think for myself, it's probably the best collective speeches that I think I've heard. And it was just really great to see that. It's great to see that all of them, respected each and every single one. And in some way, shape, or form, their story is intertwined with our generation of the basketball that we've grown up, not just talking about, but watching, Shaw, funny enough. And I think it speaks volumes, how much of an impact that they will still continue to have, even though they are forever enshrined, among the greats of the NBA.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people enjoyed the conversation, not the conversation, but as you alluded to, the speeches, paid great homage to people's families, loved ones, and all those that helped them along the way. And again, I just think the group was, in essence, kind of iconic in a ways. A lot of the, especially on the male side, tied to each other in some capacity, played against each other, and all of that. So I think there's that synergy of man, we were these warriors and going against each other on the basketball court in these epic battles, and now we can really just kind of focus on the brotherhood, if you will, and sisterhood of being great and going into the Naismith Hall of Fame. So I think that collective aura and vibe was permeating kind of throughout the course of the weekend, as you're alluding to.
And I think I can also appreciate as well too, Shaw, like the playfulness that D Wade has with Dirk Nowitzki, also the playfulness of quote unquote living rent free in Paul Pierce. I don't know what is wrong with, look, Paul Pierce is among one of the great players in the NBA. Let's not get
let it go.
My God, man, dude, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if he's really just doing it for, you know what I'm saying, for the clickbait, you know what I mean? But he is literally being like the whipping boy of everybody who has a perspective, like a genuine perspective with regards to stuff happening in the NBA, because he's just be making some crazy outlandish commentary. Like even his boy KG be like, bro, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, bro,
Yeah. At this point, I think we all know what it is.
yeah.
So it's all good though.
Goodness gracious. All right. Anyway, again, congratulations to all of the NBA Hall of Fame inductees. Thank you for making our game great. Thank you for all that you have achieved. And thank you for continuing to, lay a foundation for the future generations who are going to be following in your footsteps. It's just great to see that connectivity of the past with the present, and ultimately what they combine together will do for the future. So great show on tap for you guys. Hey, the NBA schedule has been released for the 78th season of the NBA. And Sean and I were going to discuss the layout of the scheduling, some important games that we find, that you should, put on your, your Google calendar, or your notifications. And then we'll also get into, which obviously is not going to be the end of, but certainly something to keep our eyeballs on, is regarding the situation with James Harden and the Philadelphia 76ers. So a lot of stuff there. But as always, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Go to www.baselinenba.com to catch our episode and all of the great episodes. That's the home base for our show. And if you also see us on the visual platforms like YouTube, you can see down in the lower right corner the 19 Media logo. You know that the Baseline runs with 19 Media Group. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to catch our show and the plethora of great quality shows and content, and content creators that are a part of the 19 Media Group family. They cover the gambit. So you will not be disappointed, not only from listening to us, but listening to our peoples, our family, because they bring you the goods each and every single time. So please go check them out at www.19mediagroup.com. All right, Shaw. So obviously, our attention, our focus is clearly going to be on the release of the NBA schedule. And listen, they don't disappoint. I think with a lot of everything that has happened in the off season, it has elevated some games into the must see, quote unquote, dynamic, when it comes to, what we're looking forward to, and which games we're actually going to be putting on the docket. It also changes the dynamic a little bit about our expectations for the Christmas Day games. And then obviously the big topic of conversation, the in-season tournament games that are going to be taking place. This is the inaugural season of that. So what do you make of the schedule, Shaw? How much of it do you feel like the NBA got right? How much of it do you feel like they got wrong?
I'll say this. I'm going to start by saying the rivalry aspect. They're trying to maybe create and form some new interests as a result of that. And in addition to obviously the in-season tournament coming into play here now too. So those to me are two of the things that stand out in terms of like how the NBA is trying to focus. I can't recall, so I don't want to misspeak, but they did make a special note to mention that all 30 teams will at least have one nationally televised game. So, for those teams that don't always get a lot of love, everybody gets one, right? Everybody will get a chance. So that's
Which is
great
good.
for,
I think
say
that's
that
good.
again.
I think that's good. I think that's,
Yeah. Yeah. I think
we
you
have to
definitely
do that.
should.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, kind of going back, back a little bit, the one thing that stuck out to me was usually the finals rematch is something that they try to highlight. And it's just kind of like some throwaway days. Like it's not on any of the marquee days, with Denver and Miami. And maybe that's just kind of a sign of, I don't know what the ratings were ended up being for that, so to speak. But they're not trying to hype that as like the next thing great coming. Like, and especially with Miami, if they were to get Damian Lillard, that could obviously be a little bit more exciting. But at the end of the day, those games don't seem to be highlighted on the NBA schedule to some degree. But those are some of the things that stood out to me. And obviously, we want to get into the returns. I think those are the things that are probably the most exciting, although the NBA didn't necessarily highlight that. But I think from a fan and obviously from a podcasting perspective as media, those are things that we're going to be really focused on when certain guys come back into their previous hometowns.
Yeah, I just want to quickly piggyback on what you were saying before about them moving away from highlighting or headlining the NBA Finals matchup. as one of their games to look to. I'm happy about that. This is not the NFL, okay? Um, and I guess in ways the NBA kind of fits in the space between the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball really doesn't do that because they have interleague play so much that like nobody really cares. You know what I'm saying? Like I think it only matters based on the players on the roster, right? And who's making it. So I think if you're the NBA, you have to focus on, listen, the dynamic of both both the Nuggets and the Heat, I don't think warrant unless something happens significantly like Damian Lillard going to the Miami Heat. But again, this is the reason why I say flex scheduling should be something important because if something does happen, right, and you want to highlight down the road a game like the Nuggets versus the Miami Heat, because that could very well be a possible rematch come, you know, for this season and stuff like that. You have the flexibility to do that. But again, it's interesting to me that the NBA is going to choose to take a different path and really highlighting all 30 teams that they have representing. And so I think that this is a good thing because there's going to be some fallout for what's taking place because of the changes that we'll get into in regards to the lineups for opening day, the lineups for Christmas, the lineups for MLK Day, the in-season tournament. I think a lot of that is driving, how to still make a balanced schedule, but at the same time, really highlight the dynamics of what is making the league the talk of the town in the sports, spectrum.
Yeah, no, I mean, all very good points, right? So the league strategically has to understand, from a business standpoint, what are they putting out into the market for their fans and what's going to draw the most proverbial attention. So trying to double down, if you will, on an NBA Finals that a lot of people didn't expect, and maybe some casual fans, maybe quite frankly, didn't watch, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So hey, we know, as you alluded to, the NBA does have, interconference games on a regular basis, and those are two teams. Yes, while very good, they'll get what they get. I just still believe it's like I think one of them for sure is nationally televised, but at the end of the day, they're not on the marquee nights, if you will, of the NBA, like Christmas Day, MLK, et cetera, or even opening night. So that's not disparaging, I think, to either one of those teams. Obviously, the Nuggets are the NBA champions, and they have nothing in essence more to prove. And Miami is also still very, very good as well too. But from a fan consumer perspective, that's just not a marquee situation for the league. But again, I think you're alluding to highlighting all 30 teams, so everybody does get at least one shot. And I think it's great that we'll lead into maybe one of the return games, but I think Washington's lone national televised game is, Jordan Poole returning back to Golden State. Or versus Golden State. So I think in either way, that makes sense. Like they know drama and they know where to find it and how to sell it from that aspect.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm on the fence about that one. You know what I'm saying? Maybe probably because I feel like a lot is still being centered around the Warriors. It's interesting, Shaw. Given the off season that the Warriors had, right? Um, do you feel like they should warrant this much attention? So, and the reason why I asked that question is they're going to be featured as one of the opening regular season games. That's going to be on TNT, right? The Nuggets are going to take on the Lakers, and the Suns are taking on the Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
I listen. I can see the Suns versus Warriors. It plays. I'm thinking old school as well too because these are divisional. This is a divisional team, and I like to see that as far as the outset goes. Like if you're trying to get an early start in as to what the division is going to feel like and look like. Here's an opportunity to premiere two teams that are expected to, really be up there and give run to the Lakers and possibly the Clippers. I probably would have liked to have seen something a little more realistic, like for the Nuggets, maybe not so much as the Lakers. Maybe they don't have anybody obviously in their division, which speaks to how they could just easily run away with their division, literally in a sense. I would probably like to see maybe the Nuggets versus the Clippers or something like that. But
But are you
the
referring
Suns,
strictly to opening night, or are you talking about Golden State's?
I'm just talking about the opening season, the regular season NBA tip off, right? Like I would have liked to probably have seen maybe the Nuggets versus the Suns. Warriors, I don't know if whether I care if they're a part of opening, opening tip. Maybe the Lakers versus the Clippers. because of the expectations that are still there. Like I would have probably have liked to seen that. I still feel like they are force feeding the Warriors again back into the mainstream, obviously because of Steph and this idea that they can still get one more run in there. But I just don't see like the Suns and Warriors. Don't tell me it's because Chris Paul is coming, is with the Warriors and this is what's driving it. That is to me is a farce, because especially if Chris Paul, we don't know how they're going to plan to use him and in what way he's being used. So I'm not seeing where this matchup between these two teams really generates much, except for KD maybe. But again, I just think it's more about the bigger picture, about the dominance of that division. And I would have probably have liked to seen something a little bit more fine line. If you're going to make it that, go all in with it. If not, then make it about the Nuggets, who people should warrant and believe that they are among the best. Put them against the best. Essentially,
Oh.
even if it's against someone from the Eastern Conference to challenge, right? Like the Nuggets versus the Bucks, you know what I mean, or something like that.
I mean, all these teams will play each other at some point. I think they're trying to low hanging fruit, the drama of Michael Malone, talking some stuff about LeBron or kind of joking about that and the Lakers, and obviously the Nuggets swept the Lakers. So the Lakers feel some type of way about it. So hey, let's get the gunshots going as hey, first game, get that popping. Then I think from the Phoenix side, they're on TV more than any other team because of all the moves they've made with Booker and obviously Beal and Durant, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then, the old adage of just having Curry being the draw that he is. So that fan base is still extremely, extremely strong, extremely vibrant. I think it is a departure from previous years because these are really 4 West Coast teams playing on opening night, and usually you get one East Coast game, one West Coast game. These are 2 West Coast games. One of them is just going to start hella early, for the West Coast people. Denver, I guess, Mountain Central time or whatever, Mountain time rather. So I guess it'll be 6:30 time, 5:30 time for them, game start. But either way, I understand where they're going with it and not too upset about that. But I understand, there's still a lot of Warriors love on the national TV schedule, but that's kind of to be expected until, Curry and Clay and Draymond are no more.
Yeah. Let's shift our attention, Shaw, to NBA Rivals Week, and you had spoken about it a little bit earlier. What are your thoughts about NBA Rivals Week?
Well, I thought it was interesting that they go with, Boston and Miami, as a rivalry match.
I was just a man. Look, okay, go ahead. Excuse me,
I'm,
as we say, talk the truth, man. Talk the truth.
Well, again, there's something to it, because as they've met a lot over the course of the last couple of playoff runs. So I get that aspect. And, there's even some stuff from, when Ray Allen, switched sides like Anakin and went over there and the whole nine. So it's just kind of interesting that was kind of portrayed as one of the rivalries when typically, it would be a Boston LA situation. Or at least at one point during that week, Boston and LA would play, but that's not the route they go. And the other thing that I thought was interesting was Sacramento and Golden State. Just kind of throwing that into the mix as, again, a new and burgeoning rivalry, if you will, too. So a couple of things there in that week that is like, all right. But I can see the stretch that the NBA is trying to make on it.
Okay, so Knicks, Nets, okay, yeah. I mean, they're relatively around the same level, so the viability of that works. Lakers, Clippers, I'm seeing that. That's all right. That's clearly going to depend on whether or not Paul George, Kawhi Leonard are going to be, at 100%. All right, no problem there. OKC and San Antonio, like I feel like they're trying to build something from that. I would have probably
Chet
liked
Wembanyama.
I probably would have liked to have seen more so, though, OKC maybe against the Minnesota Timberwolves, like seeing SGA versus Anthony Edwards. Or I would have liked to have seen the Grizzlies against the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? Like Ja versus Anthony Edwards, because I think that there's been something brewing between those two teams. Now, again, I don't understand this one. Suns and the Mavericks, I get it. I feel like it's still slightly manufactured because I just feel like Suns have made way too many moves, and the Mavericks, to me, are still somewhere on the fence. We'll see how that shakes itself. I felt like there was something that could have been there had they really elevated it this past season, but I don't see where that is going to build up any steam. And I think by the time that we get to the 24th, we'll see where both of these teams are to determine if whether or not this is going to play. But to your point, Shaw, the Celtics versus the Miami Heat. Do not understand this for the life of me. Not that I don't think that there is a rivalry there, but to me, this makes it out like you're really, really trying to push it, and you're pushing it too hard. First of all, the true rivalry is more between the Miami Heat and the Milwaukee Bucks. If you want to make it a real NBA rivalry week and you're trying to play the Celtics against somebody, I would have liked to have seen the Celtics versus the Philadelphia 76ers, right? Or, but this thing between the Celtics and the Miami Heat, it feels off, right? Because of the fact that you're saying it's NBA rivalry. This to me would have been a great game for Christmas Day rather than this being for NBA Rivals Week. So maybe I'm leaning too much into the literal sense of NBA Rivals Week, because I'm not saying that the Celtics and the Heat can't have a rivalry. They've played meaningful basketball games, no question. But to me, the argument about what's a true rivalry, I've seen it more between the Bucks and the Heat than I do see between the Celtics and the Heat.
I mean, we know even the word perks up your ears and gets you a little terse. So I understand that for sure. And I think we both thought they did a pretty good job with it last year, and now they're trying to tweak it because they're trying to, in some ways, and even coining your term, manufacture some interest maybe in some things that maybe aren't currently there. And I think there's a lot of people who would think Miami and Boston are a rivalry at this stage, just because they've met so many times and their fan bases are diametrically opposed. Like, they do not like each other. So, I can go with it there too. I don't think the Milwaukee fan base and the Miami fan base is as angsty as I think Boston and Miami's is. So that's why I can buy into this one a little bit more maybe than you are right now.
All right. And then you got the Mavericks and the Hawks. Help me out with that one, right?
I'm assuming it's a Trey Lucas situation, more than anything else.
I feel like these games were generated by Chat GPT, or what's that the AI generated chat, like they came up with this. Like I'm not feeling the genuine process. 76ers and the Nuggets. What? Where? What is what? Because of Embiid and Jokic? Come on, man. Like,
that's where we're going. That's where we're going with it. And then you got the old school Miami versus the Knicks as well too. So I'm sure this, again, we're reading off the graphic. I'm sure there's some other games in that week that might lend to more of the traditional sense of the word rivalry for us here too. But the ones that they're highlighting are the ones that we're kind of picking on. And it's just like, all right, well, those some interesting decisions there.
Very, very interesting, to say the least. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we are rifling through the NBA schedule for the upcoming season. Amongst that, Shaw, obviously, one of the bigger items is NBA Christmas Day, right? Like, so that is essentially, as you could say, the start, the start of the real start of the NBA season, because it just always feels like the NBA, doesn't really want to challenge the NFL and any other, major sporting events taking place roughly around that time. So like MLB will be coming to an end, NFL will just be kickstarted and stuff like that. So technically the NBA's official season begins during NBA Christmas Day, right? That's when they put on their big boy pants. And so this year, Shaw, they decided to roll out, some pretty interesting games for Christmas Day. Bucks versus the Knicks, Warriors versus the Nuggets, Celtics take on the Lakers, 76ers take on the Heat. What do you make of that layout for the Christmas Day games?
Well, the marquee game becomes Lakers and Celtics. That 5:00 game is the one that they try to highlight the most for everybody, on both coasts are up and about, probably paying the most amount of attention. And it should garner a lot of interest. I think it'd be really the one that I'm probably looking forward to the most is probably Miami and Philadelphia, but it depends where both of those teams are. And is Harden still where he's supposed to be or not there? Or is Damian Lillard on Miami or not there? So that could have, probably the biggest boom or bust, I think, of all the matchups, based on kind of the schedule that we see here as well, too. So the Kyrie versus KD situation, and Luka is obviously involved in that as well, too. So that's a nice game, to kind of close things out. And then I think that the one that people are going to be most not tuned into is this one that they always do at 12 o'clock, and that's the Knicks. So Knicks and Bucks, hey, get you started here on the East Coast. But other people will just be like, all right, they'll turn it on when they turn it on. But I think Lakers Celtics kind of highlights this one a little bit, although I have the most amount of interest in Philly and Miami, depending on how those rosters shake out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you have interest in it. I have none because I don't know. They just, I don't know. Like I'm not enamored with the way that Miami plays, their style of offense. To have them as literally like almost like a primetime game. I know the prime time technically is 5 p.m. because it's Christmas Day, but here's where I would have probably liked to have the order to have been. 76ers and Heat lead off. I then would like to see I'm fine with the Warriors and the Nuggets where it is. I would have liked to have seen the Bucks and the Knicks at 5, the Celtics, I'm sorry, the Mavericks taking on the Suns at 8, and then the Celtics and the Lakers. And I'm not saying it's because I don't care for or have an interest in. I just like the idea of, I think that there's something that could be had between the Mavericks and the Suns. It would be interesting to see how Irving really steps up in primetime game against his former partner in KD and where both of these teams are, essentially. And there are two players essentially that you got to question, are they going to play in partnership with, right? Because you got Durant, Beal, and Booker, right? This really is still supposed to be Booker's team, right? And then you've got Irving and Luka, and this is supposed to be Luka's team. So it would be an interesting dynamic to see both of these teams, if all their all the roster is healthy, how this all culminates, having all of those guys on the floor, regardless of what their records reflect. To me, I would see that as being more must see because of all of the playmaking abilities that is out there on the floor at that time. I think would have been great for the NBA.
Yeah, I actually kind of like your idea. I can see definitely making all the East Coast, like truly East Coast games being first, and then some combination of those West Coast games closing things out. Specifically with the 2:30 being being Golden State and Denver. That's pretty early out there. So that could have definitely been pushed back. Typically, Denver is the nightcap on Christmas Day as well, too, and whoever they're playing. So interesting decision to move them as up as they are, but they are the NBA champs. So, trying to show them, I guess, some respect and not having to close things out. But there could be a lot of intrigue in that Dallas and Phoenix game closing things out, too. So making that maybe the 8 o'clock Eastern time game would have made more sense. And maybe, hey, they'll take your idea into consideration and flex some stuff out. But we'll see. We got what we got right now, but I like where you're going with this on Christmas Day.
Absolutely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to talk about some key returns on the NBA schedule, and then we'll also discuss about the in-season tournament. So you don't want to miss out on that. But before we let our peoples pay some bills, are you looking for the ultimate destination for NBA gear? Look no further than the NBA store. With a huge selection of authentic and high-quality products, including jerseys, hats, and accessories, the NBA store has everything you need to show off your team pride. Plus, with exclusive and limited edition items, you can make your collection truly one of a kind. And with an online presence, you can shop from anywhere in the world. Don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Visit the NBA store today by clicking our affiliate link. If you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, be sure to check out the link in the description of the show. The Baseline is working in affiliation with the NBA store /Fanatics and will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing our link. Once again, that's nbastore.vwz6.net/baseline. And as always, we thank you for your support. More from the Baseline here. Callie Warren Shaw. Don't want to miss out. All right, we're back. Callie Warren Sharp, Baseline NBA Podcast, and we are discussing the NBA regular season schedule for the 2023-24 NBA season. So, Shaw, some key matchups. I know that you pretty much put them on our Google Keep. Shout out to Google Keep for keeping us organized here, right? You made sure that you highlighted these particular dates because it's the return, right? The prodigal son's return edition of the NBA scheduling. Most notably, Dylan Brooks heading back to Memphis on December the 15th. He'll probably have a cowboy hat on in his 6-shooter. Ja Morant is returning December the 19th. Damn it, he's returning on my birthday? Oh my goodness. All right. Ime Udoka will return to Boston. That to me is probably going to be the most interesting. And I know most people probably have totally forgotten this guy got hired, right? But what are Boston fans really going to say? Like, how are they supposed to respond? KD returns to Brooklyn on January 31st. It's interesting you put that. I don't know if you put that just for the sake of putting it back, but what are Brooklyn people going to say? We hate you, KD. I mean, what's there to hate? It's like Marcus Smart, he returns to Boston. That one's going to be a tearjerker. On February the 4th, and Kyrie Irving returns to Brooklyn on February the 6th. I'm sure that they will have extra tight security, and hopefully nothing will go off on the metal detectors. So, what do we make of some of these key returns, Shaw?
For the most part, I think, the one that highlights is the most emotional is going to be Marcus Smart returning to Boston. So for sure, a hero's welcome when he does step onto that floor. Big situation for him. Expect a lot of cheers even on his behalf as well too. Be interested to see if any of the Celtics actually tear up some, but that's a guy who's meant a lot to that organization for sure.
I don't know. Let me take a step back from what you were just saying on that. I don't think they'll do it there. I think they'll do it before, right? Like I think they'll try to get it all out the way because that moment is going to be more about him. And obviously what the Celtics organization will do for him. Obviously, they're going to, put a video montage out there for him and everything like that. Listen, he's the heart and soul of that team, and he will continue to be the heart and soul of that team. And if this team does not go out and win, they're, that's going to be on Brad Stevens. That will be on Brad Stevens. So I hope he makes good, does right by Marcus Smart. But this is probably what's going to highlight, the emphasis of pressure that the Boston Celtics get the job done. Because if they don't, they're going to be looking to what they gave up to eventually not concede to what they're getting. Yeah. There's one that I want to highlight that wasn't put on there and I believe it's going to be when Van Fleet and the Rockets go to Toronto, which I'm sure that is going to be a pretty interesting situation there as well too. Obviously, the Raptors couldn't keep Van Fleet, but listen, he is responsible for the Raptors having their only NBA championship, right? Say what they want to say about it, but he's a real one. He's part of the six. So I'm sure that one's going to be a very interesting return as well too.
Yeah, I think so for sure. And seeing where Toronto will even be at that time, or Houston will be even at that time. So there's going to be some love lost, not love lost, but again, some emotions involved in I think that situation specifically. But I think of all the things, and that's necessarily in terms of guys coming back, but I think it's the actual debut game of Ja Morant that probably stands out the most of all of these situations. Ironically, just days I think after Dylan Brooks returns. I think that's if I read the schedule correctly. So either way, Morant will miss the Dylan Brooks situation, which could have been added fun, I think to that. But at the end of the day, making sure that he's in the right space and he's ready to rock, and we'll have a good sense of the Memphis Grizzlies at that point in time, even with Marcus Smart and Derrick Rose as kind of the veteran guys in the fold to kind of help right that ship in the short term while Ja is out. But I think that's a big day on the Memphis calendar, on the NBA calendar, because the Grizzlies obviously still have a deep playoff run potential and aspirations. So if he's able to return on that day, has met all the guidelines that the NBA has set forward for him, I think that could be a turning point in some ways, not only for the Grizzlies season, but maybe, in determining some of the Western Conference outcome.
We've seen the Memphis Grizzlies as a team collectively under Jenkins thrive without having Ja Morant on the basketball court, right? And it's not because of, the circumstances of Ja Morant getting himself in trouble. It's been because of legit injuries that Ja Morant has suffered, and the Memphis Grizzlies have been able to stay afloat and be viable. Actually, still be among one of the better teams in the NBA. So it'll be really interesting to see what is going to drive the conversation about the success of the Memphis Grizzlies under these circumstances. And to your point, I think that if the Memphis Grizzlies show that they're in sync as a team, collectively together without Ja Morant, it may actually make things easier for Ja Morant to acclimate himself. And it can also help extend time to allow that to happen if it doesn't disrupt the success of the Memphis Grizzlies. So, to your point, Shaw, I know a lot of people are fixated on the date. I think what we should be looking at is where the Memphis Grizzlies are leading up to that date and where the Memphis Grizzlies can potentially be once Ja Morant is allowed back into the facility, back into the inner sanctum, so to speak, of the Memphis Grizzlies season and where that may take them moving forward. I think people are fooling themselves if they're thinking that Ja Morant's going to come in and just be Ja Morant. I've not seen too many players who are going to lose a quarter of the season come in and act like they're going to play and step in and do what they did like nothing has happened and no, that just never plays that way, and it never plays well. So we'll be interested to see how professional of a job the Memphis Grizzlies really do in handling this, because this is going to make or break the outcome and the circumstance. They've already took some chances losing certain players from their starting rotation at the expense of still trying to figure out what to do with this team now moving forward. It would have been different if they kept the core pieces, but they've lost some of their core pieces at the expense of, so it'll be interesting to see how they do that moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's one of the bigger stories I think that we're going to see throughout the course of this NBA season. And it would be different if like the Grizzlies were kind of like this super average or middling team. No, they have legitimate championship aspirations and good bones to what they can do. So I think we're all in agreement. Even the moves that they've made to bolster the rest of the roster while Ja is out will help them when Ja gets back. And that's what makes this team, I think, very, very interesting to watch, moving into the course of the season. But yeah, how do they hold down the ship without him in the short term? Jaren Jackson Jr., et cetera, et cetera. All the guys that are there, Desmond Bain coming after getting that big extension. There's a lot of expectations there. So we'll see if they're able to collectively as a team live up to it until, their MVP candidate returns.
All right, Sean. So finally, let's kind of focus our attention a little bit with regards to the NBA in-season tournament. Basically, the tournament will consist of all 30 teams participating and playing in games. Um, all of them are expected to be televised. 8 teams will advance to the knockout rounds, which will consist of a single elimination game in the quarterfinals, and that's slated to take place on the 4th and the 5th of December. Semifinals matchup will be December the 7th, and then the championship game slated for December the 9th. So um, we've seen the brackets. We've seen how this all kind of lays itself out. You think it's overcomplicating people's eyes of what the expectations are, with this NBA season tournament? Or, do you see the potential of people latching onto this and really kind of riding the momentum, so to speak? I guess it's a way of the NBA kind of dipping its toes in the proverbial primetime spotlight, so to speak, ahead of NBA Christmas Day, sort of, like you've had these conversations and even uh argument, about how the NBA kind of bows down to the other, sports, major sports in their, in getting access to prime time and, conceding certain spots and things of that nature. Does this in a way elevate them back into the conversation, so to speak, by doing this? Or is it really to focus the attention in the league's attraction to, trying to put together marquee games that deserving to be in some of the, headline time frames, primetime time frames that on major networks.
Without being too coy, it's a little of everything, right? They're trying to maybe drum up some business and interest ahead of even Christmas uh, by attaching, tournament to it. there's a level of intrigue that can permeate through the casual fan base. You know, the diehards are going to be there regardless. Putting it in Las Vegas as well too, like, oh, even the location of that is all of that is strategic. You know, I think on the NBA's behalf. With the NFL doubling down after basically, I guess Christmas fell on a Sunday last year, the NFL is like, well, you know what, we're going to keep this thing going, and they still have 3 Christmas Day games, despite and that with Christmas being on a Monday this year. So I think the NBA understands that, hey, we got to go out here and try to get our piece of the pie. And we won't really know until we know with this. I understand Adam Silver's been clamoring for this for a little while. There was a lot of skepticism regarding the play-in tournament, and we see how that's turned out from a intrigue perspective from the casual fans and the regular fans and media. So that was more or less a win by and large. You know, there are some purists who don't like it, but I think we're at the same stage here now where we just got to wait and see. So I'm interested to watch. I will be a consumer of the games and see where things land. But just the main thing is because these are still regular season games, they won't be treating it like an all-star game, right? Where they're just kind of like going through the motion. So all those things I think play into it. And then the other thing that's good about it as well is that it's taking place in December, again, right before Christmas, but it's not going to infringe in some ways, like as truly as a true mid-season tournament, you know, or right around all-star where, you know, players would have to like cut their vacations, their in-season vacations short. There's a lot of things that I think went into scheduling this in the way that it did. But we are all just going to have to bear witness this December and see how it all plays itself out. Because I'm not exactly sure, but I'm definitely, again, I'm going to watch this game to kind of figure out, you know, what the level of interest will ultimately be from all fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is kind of taking a page out of Premier League style football, soccer, because you see that in the Premier League, a lot of the major teams are not major teams, major players play for other teams in other leagues and are participating in other tournaments. Like the teams themselves, they participate in other tournaments during the course of the year while Premier League takes place. So it allows those to put them in a different market and in a different spotlight. It could work. It could possibly work, but it really comes down to the presentation. And I think that is going to be so important for the NBA. I think if you do it right and you present it right, you got the right people who are really talking and selling the importance of what this NBA in-season tournament can mean, what it could potentially be like, what it can potentially feel like, and offer the uniqueness and perspective. You have a lot of places, you have a lot of ways that you can go with doing this, and certainly you can still pique people's interest in doing it. I'm still on the fence about using the regular season games as a mechanism to do the NBA in-season tournament. I thought this would have been a good opportunity to lessen games in the regular season if the focus was about making the tournament important, but not necessarily holding it against teams when they're playing against each other if they win and lose these games. But I get it. Obviously you want to incentivize guys participating and playing in the tournament itself. So by keeping them as regular season games, I get that. But I don't know if I'm necessarily on board with it because I don't know what the overall end game is supposed to be with this. And again, it'll really come down to the way that they lay this stuff out.
Well,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying time will tell, man. So get your popcorn ready for December. Maybe I won't see you in Vegas then, I guess,
maybe not. Probably not, might not happen that way. We'll see. We'll see what the sports book tell me. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, Sean and I are going to talk about a little bit of drama happening out there in Philadelphia between James Harden and the Philadelphia Sixers organization. Has James Harden activated scorch earth on team number 2? You do not want to miss out. Find out here on the Baseline.
Time to break it down to the bone gristle.
This is the Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this segment of the Baseline is brought to you by Blue View Footwear. Are you ready to step up your style game without compromising the planet? Introducing an exciting partnership between Blue View Footwear and 19 Media Group Network. Blue View Footwear is renowned for introducing the world's first fully biodegradable and durable sneaker to lead a revolution in cleaner materials and manufacturing. They offer sleek and contemporary styles that cater to a wide range of tastes. Blue View has fully revolutionized the footwear industry. Their innovative plant-based sneakers are constructed of 100% biodegradable materials without sacrificing durability for environmental responsibility. Blueview Footwear believes that fashion and sustainability can coexist harmoniously. Just visit bit.ly/Blueview19 and you'll see the ultimate collaboration of fashion, sustainability, and media excellence. And as always, if you make a purchase with Blueview, you will also be supporting the Baseline podcast. So as always, we appreciate you and your support. Shaw, one of the big topics that's happening right now is James Harden. Duh. Because our man, he got to be the center of attention. If it's not the beard, then it's got to be the drama. Give or take, right? But basically, the last couple of weeks, James Harden has expressed his frustrations and his dissatisfaction with the 76ers organization, most notably with his former friend, Daryl Morey. You would think that James Harden is a Republican, the way he was like talking up a storm about his boy Daryl. And now all of a sudden, he just starts going, Bill Barr on everybody saying, oh, it's a bridge too far. You can't move me to the Los Angeles Clippers. Then you are a liar. I don't like you, and I don't like your organization.
Yeah,
And I will never.
It gave me Kanye vibes,
Exactly.
back in the day,
Exactly.
with George Bush, right? So,
What are we gonna do, man? But now the NBA is investigating this. But above all of this, Shaw, the big question I think that really stands out about all this is, why is James Harden going scorched earth on the Philadelphia 76ers? And is it necessary for him to do such a thing?
well, James Harden is a man who likes his money, and he likes his accolades, and he gave up money to try to help the Sixers out to achieve an NBA championship, and was not retributed to not get what he and Daryl Morey winked on. So that's where all of this stems from. There's a lot of reporting on exactly the nature of that and where it's all going to go from here. What Harden will ultimately do to try to force his way out, and him saying, "Hey, get ready to be uncomfortable," and everybody understands that Morey is fine being uncomfortable, all out of Ben Simmons situation. But this really stems from them potentially having a deal on the table, and now Harden was not able to capitalize on what he thought was going to be a lucrative situation for him, after he sacrificed to, in essence, make Philly better. And while I don't necessarily think he's the most altruistic guy I've ever seen or come across, there could be some validity to that aspect of it, because, hey, well, yeah, I'll help you out now, but you're going to help me out on the back end. I'm supposed to get it back. So with Morey now playing more or less hardball and saying, we're not going to just trade you for pennies on the dollar, or we're not going to pay you and do all these things because the time is kind of coming near for Harden's twilight. That situation is now just gone completely left and off the rails. And we have a situation now where the 76ers themselves, despite having a talented roster, are going into the season with a lot of turmoil that they didn't expect to have, even after firing Doc Rivers before the summer started.
The only thing that I want to ask you, Shaw, before we get quickly into what this is all going to mean for maybe Joel Embiid. If you're James Harden, what did you think was going to happen, right? Like, if your motivation was the fact that you don't want to lose out on the player option that was afforded to you, what did you think was going to happen by now committing yourself to coming back to the Philadelphia 76ers, even if the intent was that you were hoping to get moved to another team so that they would, because now ultimately you're hoping that whoever that other team's going to be is going to give you the contract that you're looking for, right? But that's because you are saying that you're going to be committed to whoever that team is. And that could be any team, right? You can't just say it only is going to be the Clippers, right? Like, this is what we were just talking about a moment ago with Damian Lillard. The timing of your thought process may have been good for you, but it wasn't going to be good for everyone else. And now because of it, it's not going to be good for anyone else, right? Because that shouldn't have been the motivating factor to what was going on. And you would have thought that he understood that this is the second time that this has happened. So clearly he does not learn from his own previous lessons. But again, this is, to me, it's just crazy how this has played itself out, only for us to come right back to where we started.
Yeah. Well, he thought he had more value around the league than he actually did. And he also had to remember, this was something I was reading. I can't remember the article. I want to give them props, but just can't remember. I think it was a Dan Devine article on Yahoo potentially. But remember, Harden put out stuff about returning to Houston like mid-year. Like that stuff didn't just come out of nowhere, right? So you're in the middle of a run, and Harden had some injuries this year, but came back and was a league leader in assists and the whole nine. So had a relatively good season, playing a complementary role to Joel Embiid's MVP season. But you're out here now putting out stuff that you may not return the following year in the middle of the previous season. So to me, that's where there's some misguidedness, I think, on terms of his overall expectations. And in some ways, he's made a bed, and Daryl Morey was like, "Yeah, cool. Well, you blink first in this relationship, And if you're Morey, you can definitely say those things, right?" So that's why I think this conversation is so layered and convoluted. But at the end of the day, Harden just kind of wants what he wants, and yeah, remember he left Houston in arrears. Left Brooklyn, maybe wasn't wrong to lead Brooklyn in the situation that it was, but again, still forced his way out of that situation. And now is saying he doesn't want to return and play with the reigning MVP with the chance at an NBA title. That says a lot about what he thinks about himself, what he thinks about the organization, and the future of the 76ers.
Right. So with that being said, right now, let's go ahead and shift our attention to Joel Embiid. You see how this is playing itself out, right? What do you do, right? If you're Joel Embiid, and I say this question, Shaw, I throw this question out there in this kind of way because I think if you're Daryl Morey, while in many respects you're obviously responsible for the team and the organization, so it could never only be about James Harden, right? I'm sure he had that level of thinking when he was in Houston, because the Houston Rockets was all about James Harden. Don't have that luxury with the Philadelphia 76ers. The Philadelphia 76ers has always made this about Joel Embiid, and it's always been about the process. And let's remember who basically was the architect of the process, Daryl Morey and his minions, right? So again, another thing where I don't understand what James Harden was thinking when he came over to Philly, that he think that he could reenact something that he was not the builder of, right? He didn't start, right? He wasn't the Joel Embiid for the Philadelphia 76ers. That was Joel Embiid, and he's still there. So I don't understand what he was thinking there. But again, I digress. But when we're talking about the Philadelphia 76ers, if you're Daryl Morey, you have to obviously be careful with the way that you're handling what you're doing with James Harden, because it's also speaking to Joel Embiid, who now, obviously seeing how all of this is playing out, he's like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I really going to win here? Am I genuinely going to I have an organization that's genuinely looking out for my best interests in building a team that I think is worthy or good enough to compete with the rest of the other teams that are out there that are in my way from getting a championship?
Yeah, Joel is in a very, very, very tough spot. I think, he's been an all NBA player, been an MVP, been all-star, etc., all of those things. And I've seen iterations of this roster, and they just haven't been able to get over the proverbial hump. Take this, he didn't have a great, masterful, even MVP like playoffs himself, right? He did not. And I think he could admit to that. But you bring in a coach who is going to be questionable because, he and Nick Nurse don't have like the greatest relationship, or didn't have the greatest relationship, coming into the hire. So you got to see what that's like. And now whether or not he was in on the Morey Harden conversations, wink, wink agreement, it doesn't matter. You're looking for talent on the roster. So to me, Embiid is kind of just like, all right, I've been through the process. We've had X amount of playoff success only to come up short every single year and not even make it to a conference finals. This might be, again, as you said earlier, maybe this is a bridge too far now for that. The other aspect of this too is Tyrese Maxey. This young guy is, a brilliant basketball player with a very bright future. But how is all this plays out? He's oscillated over the last few seasons, depending on whatever personnel they've had, and just trying to find his role. So, he backseated, when Harden came over to the team, and still was really efficient in the time that he had. But that's a guy who's ready to blow. He's probably like, listen, do it or don't. But, I need to figure out what my role is going to be and how I can matriculate and how he can even build a relationship with Embiid on the court that's long lasting. So to me, that's where Philly's in a very, very precarious situation, because you kind of have to watch, obviously, a generational, in some ways, talented Embiid, how that's going to play. But even, you're kind of your star in the wings here in Tyrese Maxey. Uh, Harden is kind of messing things up, but Morey's played his part in it as well too. And I think going into these next few weeks before training camp, things are going to get really, really uncomfortable. But hey, we're going to get our popcorn here and watch this all kind of unfold. My guess is Harden probably ends up getting moved. But what will be the ultimate return for that? And again, will it be too late? For Joel Embiid in terms of like how he views his future with the franchise moving forward.
I think, well, he's going to have to be moved. And the reason why I say that is because once the NBA gets involved, right, the NBA always finds something. And whatever it is they find, it may not be egregious enough that warrants maybe suspensions or, guys losing paychecks, but it could be impactful enough that it really, really damages and severs any chance of, a mea culpa or, peace treaty between the two parties. I mean, ultimately, something is going to be leaked, something is going to be had, something's going to be found out, and it is better that you move people away from each other rather than closer. You know what I'm saying? So again, I just think it's a foregone conclusion. You have to move, James Harden. Really, the sooner the better. I think if you are the Philadelphia 76ers, I think you should do it, you know, regardless of how long the NBA is going to take to look into the inquiries. But I don't think you want to wait until after the NBA has drawn its conclusions and has fed information, because obviously it means that information is going to be fed to both parties. So if there's things that weren't told, that weren't said, that now suddenly get leaked, not only are you going to be playing damage control with whatever you're trying to do to facilitate moving the player, you're going to be playing damage control about what has been leaked out to the rest of the players that are still currently on the roster for this upcoming season, and what management probably thinks of or thought of at the time that all of this stuff was going on. Do you really want to be in the middle of all of that? So
Yeah,
man,
well, remember the league penalized Philadelphia from last year's, debacle in terms of, the draft picks, and kind of already saying, hey, this wink wink thing that you did, we're on to you. But now it comes back literally the very next summer, and now Harden's making demands and doing the Lillard route, saying, well, I only want to go to one team. So all that too. So the league is just kind of like, all right, well, we have got to get a handle on this situation with players making demands, what is being promised to them on the front end, that they feel like they can do some of this stuff as well too, and just trying to drill down into stopping some of the nonsense, if you will, because now the organization is still trying to protect itself, whether it's doing it with the most morals in place. Obviously that's debatable, but I think on its face, it's like, hey, well, yeah, if you paint us in the corner where it can only be the Clippers or bust, that's not a fair negotiating standpoint, I think, from Daryl Morey and the Philadelphia 76ers. And they're not innocent in this in any capacity. But that's why, again, it's just this whole windfall of, of problems and trouble for multiple players and people involved in this situation. And hopefully the guys like Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, and even guys like Paul Reed, you know what I mean? Like, they're just trying to hoop. They don't need all this drama. They just want to come in here and play basketball. So hopefully this organization can get its proverbial act together, but it seems like it's going to be a little bit of time before we see everything kind of shake itself out.
I think one thing is definitely for certain about the Philadelphia 76ers is there's a lot of immature voices in the room, and they're going to have to get that cleaned up, number one. Number two, you talk about a hell of a way to come in as the head coach if you're Nick Nurse. I think you probably would feel a little bit more relaxed if it was Doc Rivers, because Doc Rivers knows how to take those blows, right? He knows how to take the arrows that are going to be coming at the Philadelphia 76ers should they come out the gate struggling at the beginning of the season, if they're impacted by what's taking place right now between Harden and the Sixers. But I think more importantly, and all of that again, Shaw, is what will be the mindset of the Philadelphia 76ers, when the season begins, because a lot of it is going to be predicated on what the outlook of this roster is going to look like at the beginning of this season. And I'm going to say this, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Joel Embiid. He's deserving. He's an MVP. his talent as an MVP is above and beyond. Like I'm never going to question him not being one of those guys. I've said this before. The Philadelphia 76ers essentially would be a championship bound basketball team when Embiid plays at an MVP level. But when we talk about being an MVP of the league, when we talk about being an MVP champion, the most important aspect of it are the intangibles that I just think, again, Joel Embiid has not figured that stuff out yet. And so while on a statistical level, he got his flowers regarding getting this MVP, he's not going to be a champion. He is going to have to figure out a way for him to take another step in showing the type of leadership that regardless of all the chaos that's going on, he's going to be able to have a voice and have a say with the guys that are in that locker room, galvanize them, get them focused. We'll see whether or not that's going to play itself out this season. But when we looked over the last few years, we have seen a lot of quote unquote Joel Embiid, like getting into his feelings so much so that he takes himself out of critical situations where his voice could lend to galvanizing the team to step up and play better so they don't struggle. And this, again, is another situation that's out of the scope that he can necessarily handle, but he can handle being the captain of a team. He can handle being the voice in that locker room for the guys that are on that roster to not be distracted by what's going on with Harden and the Sixers organization. And I don't hear him really speaking to those things. That's when you know that he's just part of the process and he is not the process. And that, to me, I think is going to speak volumes about whether or not this 76ers team is going to have a down season this upcoming year.
I think that's actually very well said in terms of questioning appropriately, Embiid's ability to lead. Now, again, he's not going to be made a martyr in this situation, I think, in the way that Damian Lillard is in Portland and so forth and so forth. But, he's starting to build a proverbial case. But at the same time, again, this is what MVPs, this is what, all NBA franchise players do. They help galvanize a team and a roster, so there's a stark difference between, a Steph Curry, you know what I mean, and some of the other stars that are, or claim to be stars in the league, right? They've kept their locker rooms intact and overcome a lot of different situations in order to become champions. So there is some onus here on Embiid, and it will be interesting to see how he responds to this, or if he does ask out. I think there's already people clamoring in some ways to say, well, almost kind of like as we built the case even before this statement, it's like, well, would he be wrong to ask out? But if he does stay, understand and know what you're staying in. And as a result, now you're kind of taking it on your back to say, is like, all right, well, I want to be here. And here's how we can move forward, with me being the leader of this team and this organization. So I think very well said, my guy.
Absolutely, man. Awesome show, Shaw. What a way for us to kind of come back into the fold and quote unquote lay things down. You know what I'm saying? As they should be. We got some interesting things happening over the next couple of weeks. So obviously our NBA heads should not be sleeping on, what the NBA's got quote unquote cooking, you know what I'm saying, in the pot before NBA camp gets kickstarted. And like you said, FIBA World Championships, we've already been seeing some great play already by some of the guys, some interesting topics of whether or not these guys can actually achieve winning the gold medal in the FIBA World Cup. So a lot of stuff going on, and it's good stuff altogether.
Yes, sir. Well, again, when pretty soon we'll be back to our weekly schedule. So still a couple more weeks here of the bi-weekly stuff here, but it's bubbling. So we'll see how this Harden situation plays out. Definitely be watching the World Championships as well too. Good basketball. Ant-Man, they're killing it. So shouts out to him. But yeah, man, the baseline ready to rock here for the 23-24 season here just in a few weeks.
Absolutely. Once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. We'll catch up with you next time.